JMath.
Welcome officially to grade 12 trigonometry. So this is where the chapter starts. I would highly advise to revise grade 11 trig because you're going to learn two new concepts in grade 12 and then they're going to apply it to everything else you've learned already in grade 11. But let's kick off with compound angles. So you will see these four formulas on your formula sheet, so that's good news. But I would highly advise that you memorize the format because you're then just going to go so much quicker in your questions and don't always need to page back to a formula sheet and get stuck. But how do we use this? So we use this when there are two angles that's added together, or if I need to split a certain angle into two parts. That doesn't happen too often, but I'll show you an example later. So let's start with the first one. It's easier if I show you than if I tell you. So if I see sine 30 minus 5x, I then just need to go and identify which one of the four am I working with. And it is sine A minus B. So just take highlighters, show yourself the two different angles, and then it might be easier for you to recognize. So sine A minus B, I can just check the formula and then just rewrite it, but everywhere there's an A, I replace it with 30, and where there's a B, I replace it with positive 5x. So I'm not going to put the minus in the place of B. I'm just using the minus to see which one of the four formulas I'm going to use, and then I'm just going to sub in. So this first one is just going to be sine 30 cos 5x. And then, because it's sine and it has a minus in the bracket, it stays a minus. And then it changes to cos 30 and sine 5x. That's it. That's all they want. Okay, question 2. I need to identify which one. So I can see it starts with cos, and I can see the bracket has a minus. So it's the bottom one. So you'll notice with sine, the sign stays the same. Okay, it's sine cos, and then the sign stays the same, cos sine. But with cos, it's cos cos sine sine, but the plus or the minus changes when you're working with cos. So let's write this one out. So I know it's cos cos, but it's cos 7x, cos 5x. Now the bracket has a minus, and because it's the cos one, it needs to change to a plus, and then sine 7x, sine 5x. That's it. That's all I need to do, and that's the answer they want. Okay, so that wasn't very useful, but now when there's actual degrees, the sum changes a bit and you can actually get a proper answer. Okay, so now from question 3 onwards, you need to actually say which bracket it is. So they give you the expanded version, and you need to rewrite it in brackets and simplify if you can. So I first need to identify which one. So I can see number 3 is definitely a sine compound angle, and it has a plus between them. So that is the very first one. So it's sine A plus B. So if it is still very tricky, you can go and highlight the angles that are the same. So I can say the orange one is A and the purple one is B. And now I can see this is just going to be sine A plus B. So if I rewrite this, I can just say, okay, so it's sine A plus B. That gives me sine 30. And I know that that's a special angle. So just type it in your calculator and we see it's a half. Great. That's all I want with this question. Question 4. Okay, so cos, cos, sine, sine. It's definitely one of the cos options. It has a plus in between. So then I know it's cos A minus B. So I'm not going to highlight again, but you are welcome to highlight until you feel comfortable with this. So I know my A angle is going to be 73 and my B angle is going to be 28. So I can say this is cos 73 minus 28. And if my math is correct, that's cos 45 and special angles. So that is just root 2 over 2. And for those who still remember grade 10, you can also rewrite it as 1 over root 2. Your teacher will think you're very smart and you still remember the triangles. But in matric, they don't really care that much anymore. Question 5. So now I need to see which one of the four identities this is. And sine, sine, cos, cos, okay? So it sounds familiar, but it's in the wrong order. Because there's a plus, it really doesn't matter. So I can just shuffle it. So I'm just going to write the cos 76 first and then cos 16. So remember, I'm saying because it's a plus, I can just flip these two. If it was a minus, I would not be allowed to do that. And then I'm just going to say, okay, so it remains a plus, and then this is sine and sine. Now something that's very important is I need to identify what is my angle A and what is angle B, because it actually makes a difference if there's a minus in the bracket eventually. So I'm going to look at the cos side, and I'm going to say that's A, that's B. So then with sine, I'm going to have to reorder these two and write the sine 76 first, and then the 16, because that will now change into cos A minus B, which is then 76 minus 16 equals cos 60, which equals a half. Okay, so watch out for that one. That can be very tricky. You don't want to get this wrong. Question 6. Okay, so I can see there's a sine and a cos and a sine and a cos. It's definitely one of the sine compounds. But now it starts with a minus, and that's never what we want. So in this case, I'm going to take out a minus, but I'm not doing a sign change rule because I'm taking out both minuses. So I'm going to say this is minus 1. And then because it's sine, I want to write it in the correct order, starting with sine A cos B. So I'm just going to say this is sine 3 theta cos 1 theta. I took out the minus, so that becomes a plus. And then cos 3 theta sine of theta. That is then just sine A plus B, so I can just rewrite it as minus 1 sine 3 theta plus theta, and my final answer is then just minus sine 4 theta. Okay, I hope this is making sense, guys. All of these examples weren't too tricky, but now we're going to ramp it up a bit. Okay, so in exams, they get very sneaky with this. So I want you to really concentrate on these two sums that's on screen now. When do I actually expand brackets? Because the sum will just say simplify. They're not going to tell you make it bigger, make it smaller. They're just going to say simplify. So in certain sums, you need to make it bigger, and in certain sums, you need to write it smaller. So how do I know? I check, is there something that is repeating? So in this case, I have an x plus 40, but I have an x plus 40 there as well. Okay, so that's good news. And I have an x minus 5 and an x minus 5. So if especially a bracket is repeating, I know that I do not have to expand each one of those, because then I'm going to end up with 3 pages long worth of 16 expanded versions of sine and cos. Never ever want that. Luckily, no one has thought of a question that goes that big. Okay, so in this case, I can just say this is going to be sine A minus B. Okay, so I'm just going to rewrite as sine x minus 5 cos x plus 40, and then minus, the cos goes first again. So this one on the right is actually in the correct order, but then it has a sine x plus 40. Okay, great. So I can then see this is just sine A minus B. So I'm going to rewrite it as sine, and then please use your block brackets, x minus 5 minus is then x plus 40. So now I can just simplify the inside, and this just becomes sine of x minus 5 minus x minus 40, which changes to sine of the x's cancel out. So this is just sine of minus 45. Because it is sine, the minus goes to the front. So the final answer with this will just be minus root 2 over 2. Okay, so very, very tricky. Please watch out for these ones. Now in question 8, I have brackets again, but this time the brackets are not repeating. That means in this case, I actually do have to write out each one of those, and it's going to be a very long sum. So please write small, otherwise you're going to go over 2 lines. We don't want that, just for neatness. In this case, the root 3 stays in front, and then I'm just going to expand the sine 60 plus theta. So sine A cos B plus cos A sine B. So in this case, sine 60 cos theta stays a plus, cos 60 sine theta. Close the bracket. Now with the other one, it has a minus in front, so I'm going to again put a bracket there. This is going to become sine 30 cos theta, and then plus cos 30 sine theta. Okay, now I am going to multiply into the brackets, and I see a lot of special angles. So I'm going to have to change each one of them into a fraction. But let me not do too many things in one step. So for now, I'm just going to say this is a root 3. Okay, now I'm going to change all the 60s and the 30s into their fraction form, because they are special angles. Okay, and now I can just add and subtract the like terms. So I can see with the sine options, this is going to be root 3 over 2. That's going to cancel with negative root 3 over 2. And then what remains is just going to be root 3 times root 3 is just 3 over 2 cos theta minus a half cos theta. My final answer is just cos theta. Okay, so these two sums started off very similar, but it went in completely divergent ways. So please focus when you do this. It's going to get tricky. A sum you will also encounter quite often, so I would definitely guarantee somewhere in this year you're going to get a sum like this, where they say without a calculator, write sine 105 or sine 15 or sine 75. So it's values that's not special, but you need to write it without a calculator. Now, if you type this on your calculator, you will see this answer is not looking very nice. And how on earth are you going to get there? Okay, the key is always your special angles. So 30, 45, and 60. I need to use a combination and plus or minus 2 of them in order to get 105. So it's easy in this case. I'm just going to say 60 plus 45. So this is the example I mentioned where we need to split up certain angles and say it's something plus something else. So in this case, I'm going to say this is sine 60 plus 45. Now I can use my identity and expand this as sine 60 cos 45. Sine stays the same. And then cos 60 sine 45. Now I can go and change each one into their fraction form. So just use your calculator with each one. Don't type everything in at once. And then we will simplify the answer. There we go. So that is the actual answer. And I didn't use the calculator to just type in the initial thing. Remember, it's fine if you type in separate parts one by one. Then your teacher is not going to care that you touched your calculator. But please don't lose these 4 or 5 marks because you typed in the whole thing at once. Question 10. So now I can see these angles are definitely not the same, but they are also definitely not in quadrant 1, so they aren't acute angles. And that is always my step 1 if I get a big question like this. I need to break down every single angle there and write it as an acute angle. So, like I said, you need to remember your grade 11 cast rules and the quadrants and all of that. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck at this point. So let me give you a few steps. Step 1 is always get it between 0 and 360. That means if it's too big or too small, I can add or subtract 360 to get it on my cast diagram. Step 2, I would then identify which quadrant and write it as 180 plus or 360 minus, depending on which quadrant it is. Step 3, I'm going to simplify and then actually write it in the smaller form. So sine 180 plus theta is minus sine and so forth. Then step 4, I'm now going to identify, do I have two angles that's the same and another two that's the same? So A and B. If I don't, then normally you'll have to use cofunctions. So always keep an eye on your 4 set formulas and see which one is the closest you can get to. And then once you have that, you rewrite it as cos A plus B or sine A minus B. I hope these steps make sense and you can do these questions. So sine 280, it's between 270 and 360. So I can rewrite that as sine 360 minus 80. Cos I can rewrite as 180 minus 20. So remember, the answer in the bracket must be the same as where I started. So I can't say it's 180 minus 160. I need to say it's 180 minus 20, and the answer is 160. So then minus, so 100 is bigger than 90, so it's quadrant 2. So cos 180 minus 80. And then the last one, sine, so that's the third quadrant, so it's sine 180 plus 20. Okay, so now I just need to see pluses and minuses and simplify. Sine in the fourth quadrant is negative, so this is minus sine 80. And cos in the second quadrant is also negative, so minus cos 20. Then with this one, cos in the second quadrant is still negative, so this is minus cos 80. And then the last one, sine in the third quadrant is also negative, so minus sine 20. Now you can put each one in brackets or just make your multiply dots big. It's up to you. Let me just do it uniformly, so everything in brackets. And now I am firstly going to check the order that I want things in. I think the order is fine, but the pluses and minuses are now messing me up. So the first term is definitely a plus, so I'm just going to say this is sine 80 cos 20, and then a minus times a minus times a minus stays a minus. So this is then just cos 80 sine 20. And now I can check in which format is this, and this is sine A cos B minus cos A sine B. So this would just change to sine of 80 minus 20, which then changes to sine of 60. That is a special angle, so root 3 over 2. A question like that can easily count 5 or 6 marks in your test, so don't get stuck. And now the last one. I did this on purpose to show you how mean they can get. Okay, so if firstly, there's no angles that repeat. And secondly, even worse, everything is sine. So how on earth must I know which formula to use? Okay, so the key with this is always try and make everything acute angles as your first step. So anything that's not written in terms of quadrant 1, I'm going to change. So let's start with this thing. So luckily sine 50 is already in the correct quadrant. Now sine 100 is quadrant 2, so I can rewrite that as sine 180 minus 80. Okay, perfect. Then sine 400, remember I can subtract 360 from any number that's too big. So I'm just going to say this is minus sine 40. And then the last one, I need to subtract 360 from that. Then I'm going to end up with 350. I can then subtract 360 again, then I end up with minus 10. So let me just rewrite this then as sine of minus 10. So now I can rewrite everything in terms of quadrant 1, but I still only have sines there. But let's just tackle one problem at a time. So this stays sine 50. This becomes sine of 80. Now in the next one, I can see sine 40 is fine. Sine negative 10, because it's in the fourth quadrant, the minus just goes to the front. So this actually becomes a plus. And I can just say this is then sine 40 sine 10. Okay, so now everything is acute angles. But now I don't have couples together. But if I just look very closely, I can see 50 and 40 add up to 90, and then 80 and 10 add up to 90. So then I can go into cofunctions. Now I'm going to go back to the formulas. Okay, so I have two options now. I can go for cos A minus B, or I can go for sine A plus B. You can really choose, you're going to end at the same place. I am personally going to go for cos, sine, sine. So I can actually rewrite this as sine 90 minus 40, and the other one as sine 90 minus 10. Okay, the last two just stays the same. And now I can change with cofunction. So this just becomes cos 40, cos 10, and the other term just stays the same. So now I can see I have two 40s and I have two 10s, and this will then just be cos of A minus B, which is just cos 30. Okay, great. That is a special angle. So my final answer will have to be root 3 over 2. That's how grade 12 trig starts. We call this compound angles. Please make sure you check all 11 examples that I did. I tried to include every type of question you can expect in exams. Good luck with this, guys. I know it looks very complicated at this stage, but you're going to get used to it very quickly. Just keep on practicing.
If this video helped you, please like and subscribe.
JMath.